Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Central Valley Film Podcast. I am your main host, Jacob True. I am the head producer as well as one of the directors for the Central Valley Film Project. I have with me today Marciano Zapian and Roman Acosta, both of which will be directing their own short film for the project. Go ahead and say hello, guys.
Hey, what's up, guys?
How's it going, guys?
Awesome. Good to hear. So, if you guys are listening, hopefully you have heard that we have announced the official 2-minute film competition off our page. We're going to be looking for you guys to submit some films that are 2 minutes or under, shot in your homes. Go ahead and check out one of our previous videos to kind of see the description for that. But today, we're going to be kind of talking about our own creative process, as well as what we look for when we're making scripts, and what to keep in mind as a small-time filmmaker when you're creating your scripts. We decided to kind of go over that today just because we want to make sure that we find as much success as possible amongst our contenders. So we figured it'd be a good topic to discuss today in order to kind of help you guys get your creative juices flowing and to kind of better understand the creative process. So the first thing I want to ask you guys with your script writing process is, do you usually let the scripts come to you? Or do you go to the script? So in essence, do you let an idea come to you first, or are you actively seeking out ideas whenever you sit down and try and write a script?
Roman, you want to take it away?
I think I do let the idea come to me. Honestly, I don't really generate ideas very often, but when I do, it hits me very hard, and I just go for it. And I often find myself like writing more and more as I go on. So if I start from that idea, I often just go wherever it takes me. And I know like other writers like have their own opinions on that, but I don't know. Like I guess I'm just one of those people who like to, how do I say it? Like they just go with the flow. And I don't know. Hopefully, I mean honestly, I pray that I write something good, like something comes out good at the end of that. So I don't know. It's not a good technique to me, but it's what I work with the most.
Oh, that's dope. No, the thing with me is a lot of the times I try as much as I can to go to the script. I try to write as much as I can, and whatever garbage elements like end up at the bottom, like as like residual, like I toss those out, but I use every element or like every piece that I've written, garbage or not, as like bones for other pieces. Like I get like really stuck on concept a lot of the time, and that's usually what comes to me. Like I wait for those moments of like concepts to come to me, but in the meantime, like I'm writing to try to get to them and to try to solidify them. And I just like I use all those attempts to get to a concept, so that way when the concept shows itself in full depth to me, like I have all the stepping stones that I need from other pieces to get to an idea from that concept. So it's just it needs to be like a practice thing for me. Otherwise, I just get distracted. So yeah, it's just a matter of like continuing to sharpen my skills and everything. Like I could think that one script that hit me was good, versus like I've written 4 scripts that were garbage leading up to this 5th script that's awesome, and compare the two, and I find that if like technique outweighs inspiration. So anyway, that's a convoluted answer for it, but that's where I go to is I go to the script, and then I let the concepts come to me and really hit it home.
That's definitely really interesting. For me, I definitely let the idea come to me first, but I always have to like seek it, if that makes sense. So it's not, I don't sit in front of my keyboard and wait for an idea to come to me. Typically I'll be going out throughout my day and I'll just know that I need to write a script or that I want to write a script, and I'll just keep that in the back of my head as I'm kind of going about, and just through the day, ideas may sprinkle in as my day continues. Something that I had heard, I forget the name of the author who had said this, but he had asked a writer, like, oh, how often do you write, like, in the day? How long do you usually have your writing sessions? And the writer was kind of an up-and-comer, so he's kind of nervous to answer him. And he said, oh, like 9 hours, just to kind of sound impressive. And he responded with, oh, like, that is horrible. You should not be writing that long. You should only be writing for like maybe 2 hours at most, because you should be spending the rest of that time thinking about what you want to write about. And I just thought that was a really neat and interesting way to kind of think about it. Because if you're just kind of going about, you'll naturally feel emotions and connect with things, and that will trigger ideas on how to connect with that and what speaks to you and how to invoke those emotions as you're actively undergoing them. So that's what I have found my creative process to be kind of moving into a script at the very beginning. Just letting the idea come to me while keeping my doors open. Because if you're not thinking about it, if you're not looking for the idea, it's not going to find you. It's both have to kind of come together in this sort of convergence in my experience with script writing.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I concur with that. A lot of the time when I'm hit with an idea or anything, like I make it a point at any point in the day, I have like a journal on me, or I have a pen and paper near me, like at any point. Because those ideas do come, and then it's a matter of letting it simmer. And yeah, just having access to getting it down. And same goes with the knowing that you're gonna write a script today, that I'm gonna write a script today. Like on a weird segue, I don't condone this in any way, but ultimately, I remember
this is gonna be interesting.
Oh yeah. There was this day. Well, don't do as I say, not as I do.
Say what you mean.
Yeah. I attribute my first failure in like math, like my college rec math class, to writing. I had a really good year of writing, and I remember I had this like 2-hour period in between one class to my math class, and I would go down at a cafe and I would sit and I would just let things flow through me. I would think about what's affecting the world, or just ideas that I've come across, because I was taking philosophy, I was taking astronomy, I was taking all these sociology, all these different things. It was a full course load on top of math, and I let it simmer. And I guess that 2-hour period wasn't enough, because I would write and then I would just look at the time and it would be time for my class, and I'd be like, do I want to finish writing this and skip class, or do I forget it while going to class? And it was an overtaking process. Like a lot of the time I didn't even think that, like, look at the time until after the fact, and it was like an hour and a half or like a half hour into my class, and I'm like, ugh, I'm like a 40-minute walk away. I'm just gonna finish this. So I attribute my first math failure to writing. So if that's anything, like if that plays into anything, it's just ideas come and you just gotta seize them. And just the best ones come to you. But at the same time, like, I went with the sole intent to that cafe of like, something's gonna come out. Like I'm waiting for something to come out. So that's...
Sorry, Merce. Go ahead.
Go for it.
All right. I've had like ideas and moments that have stuck with me, and like you, like you keep pen and paper on you. I mean, I have my phone now. I just go to my notes on my phone and then go from there. But yeah, I'm constantly writing new moments that I just see in my head, like different scenarios, how things would play out, different ideas, all that stuff. So when I do get those moments, I'm always thinking. I mean, they're always in my mind, so I'm always like sharing the load on those ideas, like spreading it. So if there's one idea that I love more than this one, okay, I'm gonna spend some time thinking about this one. But I think I do tend to remember all my ideas that I keep in my head, and I'm always thinking like, okay, how do I piece that to this, and how do I make it flow? How do I make it work in general? And so yeah, like going back to what the author said, like spending like 9 hours. I don't really write like every single day unless I know I need to, but honestly, I think when I do, I get a lot of productive work done. Obviously, that's just putting in the work and time to do it. But it's interesting when you write something that you didn't generate an idea already, like you didn't generate from, if that makes any sense. Because you never know where you're gonna go or what you're gonna make. But me personally, I just like to hold on to those ideas. As my drama teacher in high school said, he says, because I was writing a play in high school, and I never finished it, but he said, let it marinate in your head. And I kept letting it marinate, and I never read it, so thanks. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I would just let it marinate in my head, and hopefully I can come back to it later and piece it all together once I'm there.
Definitely. I feel like whenever I get my best scripts together, it's usually through a very arduous, not like difficult, but very time consuming process, to where I get these particular moments in my head to where I'm like, that would make for a really great story moment. And each of these moments kind of spawn individually, and eventually I see like a connection between all of them on, okay, this is how I can build a story around it, to where let's jump back to Roses Are Red, where I knew I had this moment to where a girl is going into her home and the guy wants in and she says no, and just like that imposing moment of when the main character David, or the main antagonist rather, like poses over her, and it's very clear that she has no physical pull in this relationship, as he like slowly forces the door open, and it's just very easy for him. And just that very threatening moment I knew would really stick out in audiences' heads. And following that, there's the moment of her changing that popped into my head eventually. And all of these came separately. Like, I didn't even know this would turn into one story. And then I'd also thought of...
It's crazy. It's crazy how you piece them together, True. Like, you get that moment in your head, and it's all about just piecing it piece it by piece, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And what's funny is the biggest piece that I wanted to build to in Roses Are Red didn't even make it in the final cut.
What was it?
It was originally like she was supposed to kind of figure out someone was in her home. And in the final film, she like walks down a hallway to get ambushed by David. However, in the original version, I kind of had her like knowing she needs to get out and go. But then she sees that hallway and goes like, oh no, like they could be in any one of those doors. Like, I really don't want to deal with it. And then she's kind of slow walking, like really being careful about it.
Suspense.
Yes. And she doesn't know who's in here at this point. So she thinks to call David because like she's like, oh, I was just with him. Maybe he could help. I don't know. I'm scared. And then she was supposed to call. And then you were supposed to hear like the the door right next to her. And then that's when she gets like the and then he lunges out, and then they have that.
Oh, that would have been sick. That would have been sick to see.
I know. That was the best moment. That's where I was like, okay, man, I need to make something with this. But yeah, I don't remember what didn't work out, but it didn't work out. And
yeah, well, the final product ended up being really good. You know, me and you had a whole conversation about that.
Exactly, and that's why you got to be ready to make those cuts and like accept the fact that a script is changing as you're shooting it, you know, because that was the moment I wanted to build around, and it just slipped through the cracks. And that's just a part of the creative process, is making those compromises as you're going, because I'm still very proud of the final product. Of course, I would have loved to kind of figure out how to do that moment, but I'm glad I didn't, because it wasn't necessarily possible at the time of shooting, and it worked out for the better.
Well, now that's some good trivia right there.
Yes, sir. Some BTS of True Views,
Yeah.
real life productions prior to the film project. When you guys are like writing a script, like what do you look for when you're writing it? Like, do you put theme first? Do you put character first? Do you put like structure first? Like, when you're putting together a script, what's like, okay, I need this first? What's your first focus when you're like...
I get you. Lately, it's been theme for me, and there are certain themes I want to tackle. You know, when I get the opportunity to write something new, there are themes I want to tackle, but sometimes I don't get around to that. So I think of a moment or like a story arc or structure first. You know, I'm never really thinking about character, which is something I really want to do, because you get those directors like, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul Thomas Anderson, who's like always character first. Even movies like, I know Moonlight is very character driven, and you get all these character driven movies that they just go full force, and I'm like, why can't I do that? I need to work on that. So I think in the future, it's definitely something for me to work out on.
Definitely. I feel like character is something I need to work on as well. Like, I usually leave the framework there, and then let the actor kind of fill in the rest, because usually on this level, when I'm writing a script, I'm writing with a certain actor or actress in mind. So usually I'll just kind of write around them, which again, I don't want to hop back to Roses Are Red. But that was actually another big mistake with David, was I don't feel like I had characterized him properly in the final product, which was no fault of Marciano's as the actor, but for me as the director, to where I could have definitely done a better job of kind of crafting the David I had originally seen in my head versus what popped on screen. Because what hopped on screen was someone who was once really like kind of cute and cuddly and flirty to like really menacing and cold, which is a good way to put it. But I definitely wanted a little more nuance in there, to where I guess like a very funny and casual way to put it would be like almost like a simp on steroids, to where
Oh wow.
like I wanted him to be really shy the whole time, but like almost stubborn in a way, to where like during that opening scene, I'm gonna leave a link to Roses Are Red in the description just so you can kind of watch it and get an idea of what I'm talking about here. So where during the opening scene they have this small argument about tomato pie pizzas or whatever, like
Oh yeah.
and the way they played it was like fun flirt or whatever, which was fun. And I wanted Katie to play it that way, but I wanted Marcy to almost seem like he was in it a little too seriously, like in his performance, like he's really kind of almost like white knuckling it, like, no, I think I'm right, you know, just to kind of hint at the fact he could be angered easily. That way when he does
Like,
that,
don't piss this guy off.
exactly, that way when that turn happens, it's more reasonable, because that's a great moment. I still stand by it, but you could have elevated it even more if we kind of saw that in his character. Because one of the biggest critiques I got back was that it was a really big turn for David to take at that point. So that's something I would...
You don't think you get that moment when he's trying to enter the home and Katie's character refuses?
Yeah, he gets angry, but I wanted to kind of hint that he could get angry, because at that point he seemed like the perfect man. You've spent about, I believe it's 2 minutes with him, and he's just this really great, sweet, cute guy, but then he turns into this sinister guy like on a dime, you know, and that's a really quick and drastic turn to have, because like when he grabs that door and pushes it open, everyone's like, oh no, like, because it wasn't necessarily bad for him to ask to come in, you know. It's like, oh well, like that could definitely be uncomfortable, but I wouldn't call that like evil or like threatening, you know. But as soon as like he puts the hand on the door and opens it, you know, that's the turn I thought of, and it's definitely a great turn, but it's a very sharp one at that.
I feel you, man. Yeah, that's something to look out for.
So if you suggested more of an incel kind of approach, would you think you've yielded that result?
Um, I would like to think so, but at the same time, it was very crucial for the audience to kind of be on David's side, more or less. So if it was too weird, then the whole time, like, then that surprise, that twist wouldn't matter much. So again, it does work to the film's benefit to kind of have that surprise because I did want it to shock the audience, but I would have liked to earn that moment just a bit more somehow. Like, if I had had more time in the film, if I had lengthened it a bit, maybe get more of the date, and then have that be the midpoint rather than the end of the first act.
Yeah, I can see that.
For you, Marcy, what do you like to look for in a script first? Like when you've got your concept locked in, like the very loose idea of it, what's the first thing you want to tackle?
Oh man, I'm political. I go with theme like almost every single time. I think about I use a lot of my films as means of answering a question, or even posing a question, or solving a problem that we're facing right now. That like a lot of the times when I'm in these cafes, or like when I'm just somewhere where I've devoted to writing, like I pick up, I look at the newspaper and I see what's pervading right now, what's the common talk right now, and I look at the issue, look at the questions posed or the problems posed, and try to answer it or make satire out of it if I can't do anything else. And like it just, from there it starts to evolve, and then it starts to, like, I think about, like I create a world based on this theme, and then like if I focus at all on characters, it's almost accidental. Like I put characters in this world, and the reactions have to be obviously like believable, but they also have to serve some purpose. Like they also have to uplift the theme in some way. So like a lot of my stronger scripts start to incorporate some of the characters' own themes. Like at one point I have trouble bridging the gap between images, because I see the script in images as well, and the theme that I'm trying to get at with in mind. But at one point there's gaps, and the thing that fills the gaps is the character's reaction and how they're going to propel the story forward. So that's when I start to like really focus, like, wow, I'm going to plug it. Like the piece that I'm going to be working on in this project, honestly, it was just supposed to serve a purpose of telling an old Bible story. But then it turned in, like, I got really focused on Michael, in The Boxer, or The Angel. I got really focused on him as a character and the circumstances that he's like set in. And then it was just going to be Samuel, who's suggested only briefly as a family man, or that he has a kid. And in that he's like training at the same gym as Michael, and he sees his kid and his wife like watching him fight or watching him train, like just quick snippet. But then I ended up like going with a heart to heart, without giving too much away. But ultimately, like it's those moments of like gap that I have to fill, and the characters do all the work if they're written right with theme in mind. So like it's just reactionary a lot of the time. So to answer the question in earnest, it's really just I look at theme is like the superior thing, and I look at characters as pawns immediately, but then it's like I can't help the fact that they start to shape the story. Like their reactions, they are people in circumstances. They are going to react in ways that can't always be symbolic.
Definitely. And to connect back to like the inspiration behind your script for the film project, like it's really cool to kind of draw in a very allegorical sense those inspirations for your scripts. And for any of you at home who are writing your scripts, don't be afraid to quote unquote rip off from like another property. The goal is to make it your own, is the thing. If you're just taking someone's and not reworking it in any way, then in that case you're doing a disservice not only to yourself as an artist, but also you're just telling the same story in a most likely poorer fashion. But to draw inspiration is a completely different and separate topic altogether. I had read Marcy's script, and for those of you who stick around to the end of the film project, I am very confident that's going to turn out wonderfully. It's a wonderful script. It's very tactful and building further. Oh, yes, of course, dude. I got to praise my boy. I brought him on for a reason. And building off of that, after I'd written the script for the 2-minute film challenge, I've been compelled to write a stage play for some reason, to where like I want to take my hand at like some big tragedy, like some epic tale. And I'm really studying Hamlet as well as even like Star Wars, so that just shows how far and separate two things can be, and how you can meld that all into just one new thing, to where even if I were to say that, those inspirations may be very clear upon watching it, but to a viewer who is unaware, then it'll just feel completely organic. And I think that's a great balance to have when you're crafting that stuff. For me, though, when I'm writing a script, I look at structure first and foremost, just because I know it's helped me significantly in kind of figuring out how I want to write. Because I don't consider myself a writer, or a great writer at that. At this point, I am a writer, but it has been through practice and necessity rather than just sheer talent, as others may be able to say about themselves. So when I was first getting into it, I knew I needed help in making something compelling and great. So I went out and I researched and educated myself on story structure and what people look for when they're connecting with stories, and of course theme and character come along with that. But for me personally, structure has always helped kind of figure out the path for a film. Third time's the charm, looking at roses are red. When that whole process was going down, when I was writing the script, I had a strong beginning and a strong end, but I didn't necessarily know how to bridge the gap. And once I had structure, I not only was able to fill it in, but I was able to fill it in with another moment that I'd come up with some other time, but as well as adding plot points and beats that elevate the script rather than drag it out. Because a lot of people typically fade out or die in the middle of their script, or entering like the second or third act. For people that don't necessarily know act structure, it's basically after the beginning. So let's say, I'm trying to think of a clear example here. Let's say someone has just heard like, oh, like this bully or this villain is coming to get you. And at first they're scared. They don't know what to do. But then they go, you know what? I am going to take this person on. I am going to go on this quest. After that moment, that's usually when you'll start to struggle with coming up with this story, because a lot of us connect to the beginnings and ends, of these things without thinking about the middle. So structure has really helped me kind of fill out and enrichen my story for the viewers.
Can I pose a question at that point?
Yes, of course.
What do you use to structure? Is there a formal map? Is there like a plot line, timeline? Like, do you do note cards? How do you formally structure your pieces? Like, what are you based on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually I'm going off of a traditional 3-act structure, but I keep it very, very loose for my sake, just to make sure I don't get too structured. Because some people knock structure and say like that's gonna reduce your creativity and force you into like a formula, which I strongly disagree with. But I don't want to fall into that trap, because it is possible to where you're just like filling in the blank, so to speak, but I definitely don't think that's usually an issue, especially for when you're first starting off. So for me, I basically look at a 3-act structure to where it's the beginning act to where you're establishing the world and then the characters, and then following that first act is when you enter the problem, and the protagonist has to kind of figure out how to deal with said problem. And then the second act is that rising tension, and a good way to not have to raise tension all the way to the third act is to find that midpoint to where there's a huge turn in the script, to where you now understand the problems that are ongoing within that, to where the hero has a big victory or a big loss. And then that leads to the end of the second act, which in my head is the climax, to where you reach that emotional epitome. And then third act is when you bring it to a close and you deflate it. That may be incorrect in terms of how like academia formally label it, but that's just how I view it. So that's how my labeling system works with that. So if I were to connect that back to Roses Are Red, first act is that little conversation of the flirtation where you understand they just had a cute date. This is a great boyfriend. End of first act is that door opening moment to where you realize, oh, this is a little weird. And there's 2 potential midpoints. It really just depends on where it would fall. I would say it's when he gets into the house is the midpoint, because then the threat is clear and present to the viewer. But it could also be when she's changing out and she turns out the light and goes to bed, to where you realize she's at her most vulnerable. So either of those could potentially be the midpoint. And then the end of the second act is when the phone goes off and she comes out to go look at her phone and go grab it, and he attacks. And of course, the end of the third act is when he, spoiler alert, kills her, and then goes back to check the phone after it goes off again. So that's like a good kind of bone structure. But I only recommend sticking with that sort of story structure in a film that's 10 minutes or more. Following that, I do like something called setup payoff, which is basically you quickly set up the problem or the situation and then you resolve it. That could work in a very small format, as small as 10 seconds. And you could even go as far as 5 minutes. That's something I had heard from a local filmmaker, Sky Talone. She's getting her master's right now in screenwriting. So I would say that's a very credible source for very short films. So for this 2-minute film challenge, I would recommend following a setup payoff structure.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, since we're talking about like, how we develop our ideas and how we make a script, where our ideas derive from, you're mentioning your films. When we were making, Time Waits for No One, my recent entry in the 48-hour film festival, I actually just got the idea for that story from a movie by Orson Welles. Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, I think 1956. I don't know, I forgot the exact year, but 40s or 50s. But Touch of Evil by Orson Welles. And basically it starts off, it's known for this shot. It's a continuous like crane shot, and it's known for that. And it starts off, somebody sets a bomb like in this city, like in this car, in this trunk in this city, and basically the car goes off. It starts driving away, and you don't know who placed the bomb, but there are innocent people around. And I think at that point we get introduced to our main characters. So you're thinking like, okay, is something going to happen? And so it intrigued me a lot, to the point like I did write that down as a cool little moment just to hopefully one day come back to. And sure enough, I did. And that's how I ended up making that film, Time Waits for No One. That's where the story came from.
That's awesome. And
to go even further, I only had that one moment, and it was up to Michael to fill in everything else. So if you have that moment, it's about piecing everything else together. And we had, if you're talking structure, I guess I never really thought about it with my film, but I guess you do have a three act structure.
Actually, to the contrary, I would say you probably follow the setup payoff. If you were, I doubt it was conscious. Or I wouldn't think,
especially with all the time restraints.
Exactly, it's really hard to kind of really think about it like in that formal of a way. But I would give props to your writer. It probably just came instinctively to where within the first minute or minute 10 seconds or something, the problem has been set up to where there is a bomb and it is going to go off, and you raise that tension to where that final payoff is the sort of showdown between the two officers. So it's a very clear just setup payoff, and you get to have those moments. And even then you built in that midpoint to where you have that criminal character come in and take out the civilian.
That change. Right. Oh yeah. Oh that. Yeah.
To where that's that midpoint where they go, no, we just failed that person, So it very clearly follows, a solid pacing, solid structure. So strong props to the writer on that.
Yeah, Michael, man, he did really good.
Shout out McGrath.
Hey, what's up, Michael? That's awesome. I mean, he has a talent for that. He's given a concept and he just rolls with it, and just he's able to crank out some pretty wicked dialogue and then just mechanics for it. It's really conceptualization at its finest. So good on him, man. And yeah, man, that's really cool. I can feed off of these things.
Oh yeah, definitely. And to further kind of give insight into the process, I was just curious what your guys' biggest mistakes have been previously in writing scripts. I know for me, I would often get too ambitious when writing a script without even knowing it, to where obviously I'm not going as far as saying oh, and then the spaceship flies in and blows up the building, But I had this one idea one time when I was first learning filmmaking, to where I wanted to shoot a scene outdoors and then sort of do this adjustment to make it almost surreal and otherworldly. And it was technically within the realms of possibility. I had quote unquote the resources to do it, but I definitely lacked the technical proficiency to actually execute it. Just because you have the tool doesn't mean you know how to use it. And I was definitely a victim of that. Just kind of shooting a little too far. And I was just wondering if you guys have any mistakes similar to that, or if you could think of an instance to where you wrote a script and then in hindsight you're like, oh wait, that could definitely use some tightening or refreshments.
Oh
yeah, I think I've always lacked structure. Sorry, Marcy.
No, go for it.
Not always lacked, but I think in my earlier scripts, I think I started writing in high school. I was probably a junior, so junior senior, I started writing a lot, and I had no structure. I had an idea of it, okay, I know I need to introduce these characters. I know I need to set up a problem, but how do I fill in everything else? So I guess I always had that problem. That was a very early problem, along with character. Okay, do people even like this character? Does he or she have layers? What's even going on? But now, as I gain more knowledge on the process of filmmaking and other aspects like writing, and just watching more movies, educating myself on how others did it. I have a more clear way of structuring and adding layers and adding all these things like theme and character and all these different drives and all that. So I think it's taken me years, to be honest, but I could always use the extra work on it.
You know what? I don't mean to just segue. I'll get into the mistakes that I made, but a lot of the tightening down that I've had to do is really stage it out. If I saw that or read that a piece was starting to waffle around, because I try to keep all of my decisions visually, cinematically, I don't make arbitrary decisions, and I don't use arbitrary language. I try to keep the verbiage down. I try to keep everything in the screen minimal as much as I can, and if it's on screen, it's necessary. Like it's
important.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
That's not to say that there are things that just happen on screen, or that like there's busyness on screen, like value that's cool, but a lot of the times, like if I am gonna put something in front of the audience, it's going to be it's a valid decision. It's a thought through decision. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Even dialogue too. Lately, I've been looking at. I mean, I've been watching movies, but I've been trying to educate myself more on dialogue and how it flows so naturally. But one thing I kind of noticed on my own, it took me long enough, but like in movies, like whatever people say has to be important. So I know you guys probably laugh at me for that. Like obviously,
No, not at all.
But it's finally clicked in my head. Like okay, whatever you say, whatever you make these characters say on screen has to be important and vital to the story. Because if people are just saying things up there, we're not interested at all. And it took me years to finally realize that. So going into my next script, like I'm gonna make sure, like okay, like whatever he or she says has to be important. And I've been paying attention to that in movies too. Like if they mention something of a backstory or something like that foreshadows something that we see in the future, like okay, that's a good payoff. Like that was set up early here, and that's a good payoff in the end. So it's just those things I've been paying attention to. Like whatever you put on screen has to be important.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that, and then the like I think we need to differentiate the different I feel like film is that unique balance. It's that one thing. Something about it that has confounded me, and the thing that's really driven me to continue to do this and like want to explore this is there is a difference between a stage play and cinema, because visuals do the talking. It's not so much aesthetics do the talking, so that you're watching a book, but it's a perfect balance of sound and shape of sound, and the dialogue has to address the elephant in the room that is the theme or the story that you're trying to get through. So like that's one of the things that like I got stuck on, because a lot of the first scripts that I've written, they're nonverbal. They're just, it's like they make one statement throughout it, and that is a definite, like, listen to this because you're going to need to hear this. I'm telling you what's happening. But a lot of the time it has to address an elephant in the room or the circumstance that these characters are thrust in. But yeah,
yeah. Like, I think I just connected why I keep bringing up this film. I'd actually been sent a lot of memories from it today on Snapchat. Today, at the time of recording, marks the 1 year anniversary for the rap of Roses Are Red. And to bring it back to like dialogue, that was definitely something I struggled with in the opening, to where I knew that I wanted a fun and cutesy conversation, but I didn't want it to feel meaningless. So then I had conceived the idea of like, oh, they're arguing about something very semantical, like, oh, like tomato pie or whatever, because that was the first thing that came into my head. And I was like, whatever. And I spilled it out. But I made sure to add at the end of it, David stating that nothing is as it seems, which flies right under the radar. But if someone is attentive and they're really looking at it from like a critical thematic standpoint, that clearly establishes this idea of subversion and this idea of like, okay, like David wasn't as he's seen before. He's clearly a killer, and kind of building on that fear that a girl could have when going on a first date. Because that was definitely a large inspiration behind that script, was like hearing a story from a good friend of mine who was talking about how she had felt imposed on by a man at some point, and how much that had scared her, and me kind of thinking like, oh man, I guess like when like over half the population can like bully you like with ease, that could definitely be a scary environment to live in. So putting that in Nothing As It Seems definitely was crucial in my mind for both character and theme.
Oh, huge. And I like that. Like, I think if we can narrow down what suspense is, like, I understand that was a verbal exposition, but ultimately, like, I think a formal exposition is what really dictates or really, like, formalizes a suspense movie. Like, Hitchcock made no qualms of like what was going to happen. He didn't tell you when it was going to happen. He didn't, but he showed you, here are the stakes. This is the result that will happen. It's just a matter of time, or it's under my control. And he could drag it out as long as he could. Mm-hmm. And he did. Like a lonely hotel with only one man, and it's just one woman in one room, like, and the only other person is like his mother at that point, who you never see. Like, he's giving you the pieces for you to work it out in your mind, and you're gonna be wrong unless he blatantly, like, you're gonna be wrong, but you're also gonna be right. That's the great thing. But it's all to his orchestration, and I feel like that that explicit verbal cue set it up to where, like, obviously if you're attentive, but it's also like something that you can harken back to, like, oh, I knew the story all along, but I didn't know how. And that's the thrill of it all. That's the experience of it all.
Definitely. All that stuff's really crucial. And to sort of reel it back and bring it back for a moment to the 2-minute film challenge and our preparation for that. When you guys crafted your scripts for this challenge, what were you keeping in mind in terms of limitations? And like, how did you write around that? Where did you see advantages? And where did you see like weaknesses, and how did you build around that with your guys' scripts?
For me, I when your only restriction is to be at home and you have 2 minutes to do it, I thought about, okay, what's around me? What do I have? I mean, as far as like crafting it, I've experienced in directing, writing. Okay, I can make the story. I've experienced acting. Okay, I can act in the story too. Who's gonna be my camera guy? Who's gonna edit? Luckily, I have a brother who's 16 now, so I mean, he has some experience on the camera, and he's stepping up his game in editing too. He might be even better than me. I mean, I suck at editing, but coming after you, True.
Hey, watch it, we're buddies.
No, but he's offered to help edit, so I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm a little sister on the boom mic. All she has to do is hold up the mic. So
got the family affair.
When it came to yeah, exactly. When it came to writing it, I tried keeping it simple. It was kind of hard, but Tree came up to me. I think I was given like 2 days, because you came up to me on a Thursday. You were actually at my house. Mm-hmm. And then you told me, yeah, Saturday you need the script, so 2 days. Okay. I busted it out last minute. Thought about what I had, what I can do. Going back to like themes and all that, and like other stuff we were talking about. I kind of was just writing this story and just seeing where it went. At first, I had this theme I wanted to write about. It was how you get so caught up in your life and like your daily, just like your daily life and like what you do on the daily basis, like how you get so caught up in your business that you forget about the people around you. So, and like how you tend to push them away without you realizing that, and when they need you the most. So I was going to try and include my whole family in this too, like if not acting, like voice acting, like you hear them like off screen. But it would just be like constant like pushing away, like, no, I need my time. I need this, just me, just selfish, so, all that selfishness. And so I was trying to go for a theme like that. And then I got, you know, of course I got to like the second act and I got stuck. So I was like, okay, can I change the story? So I started thinking about myself, and I added some of me in it, and that I was able to finish the story. And I guess the theme of it, I don't know if did you read the script yet, Marcy?
Oh yeah.
Did I end up? You sent it, so you got it. So, like I said, it threw me in there, and I guess the common theme would be like what you miss the most. You know, you see something that reminds you of something, and you can't get those days back, and it makes you want to go live up those days again. So, I guess that was the final product right there, as far as crafting the crafting process goes.
Definitely. And for you, Marcy?
For me, it was like pardon the crude verbiage, but it was like kind of like a balls to the wall experience. Like I think the biggest thing with my pieces is really putting a face to what it's like to work indoors and everything. And I feel like I wanted to make levity of everybody that has to do it. I'm grateful in a time of like unemployment and isolation that I have like the ability, one, to work, and two, that like I can get away from the isolation, even if it is work. Like I still can take in from at a glance, like life happening, see the good, the bad, the ugly of it, but I still get to see it. Whereas some people are like forced to be, or not so much forced, but like they're prohibited from going out, whether it be to medical ailment, like or immune issues, but also just the fact that they're unemployed or they're working from home, like they have no forward operating base. Like I wanted to make levity of that, and without making it totally a quarantine movie. Like, so it forced me to get experimental. So I hope that I can achieve that through my piece. Is like, how can I break just the threshold of just one room, but also allowing it to be the centerpiece of the story. Like it is, like I make no qualms that it is one room, one person, and these are the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I really like the direction each of your guys' scripts had took. So if you're listening to this, stay tuned for the competition to see our releases alongside it, because it's going to be some pretty exciting stuff. And I really like your mindset, Roman, of like, okay, I want to use all my family. I want to make the most of what I have with this. And with my kind of thought process with it, I definitely wanted to use this as an opportunity to demonstrate to other filmmakers who may think to themselves, oh, like, I don't have a big team. I don't have a lot of like equipment and so on and so forth. So I have been trying to think of like how cinematic can I get with like as little equipment and as few crew as possible. To where I've been trying to think of like skeleton production and how I could craft moments to where people will say to themselves like, oh man, like how did he like pull that off on his own? Like it almost seems like impossible, you know? And that was definitely my mindset going into it. So I knew kind of what kind of a story I wanted to tell going into it, to where there's going to be a very cinematic edge to it at a point, and a very almost like Spielbergian touch to the aesthetic, and building around that and understanding the theory definitely helps all that come together in a very cohesive and intelligent manner. So like if I were to say theme for mine, I really probably don't have one. I have no idea like what it would be about deeper, you know? I guess like if I had to put it down, it would be like that feeling of wonder. Because that's definitely what I want to elicit from the viewers, like a feeling of curiosity, a feeling of inspiration almost, and just like I want to hear like a ooh like by the end. If I were to be sitting in a room with everyone. Evidently, I won't be in a room with everyone, but that's definitely my goal with the film.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people find it difficult to make a story that's only 2 minutes long. So honestly, I mean, I think if you look around what you have, what's around you, honestly, I think if you look hard enough, you're gonna find something's there.
Filmmaking
Definitely.
is. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. That was all I had. I got my bit out.
Filmmaking is problem solving. Like any. From what I've gathered from like a multitude of different directors and their commentary is just filmmaking is problem solving. You have a skeleton crew. They all serve necessary functions, and one decides, well, I got caught in traffic, or I can't make it this day, or you have 3 shots to get by sunset, and like I'll always harken back to that, like David Fincher.
David Fincher.
Yeah, you have 3 shots to get until sunset, but you can only get 2. So figure it out. Like it's problem solving. So if you have one room and it's just you and a camera, it's really like that should be all you need. And like for 2 minutes being the major or the cutoff, oh, that's like I can't wait to see the things that the fruits of like isolated minds like itching to get something out. Like I can't wait to see that.
Me too, and that's definitely the principal philosophy behind that time limit, because you guys have all the time in the world. I'm sure if I asked someone to make a feature-length film, I could probably get one out, you know. But I want to display not just for ourselves but for the community that a great story can be as long or as little as you like. It's just you need the passion and the focus and the craft to support that. And that's definitely the philosophy going into it, and just building around those limitations. Because for any filmmaker that like has that philosophy of, oh, like I don't have a ton of crew, I don't have this equipment, I feel like that's the equivalent of a painter saying that they can't paint because they don't have a 10 by 10 foot wall they want to paint a mural on, because they want to paint murals. And it's like, well, you got to start somewhere. You start with the canvas. No one's just going to give you that brick wall without any, prior work. So you got to be able to hone in your skill, hone in your talent, so you can understand how to even make a painting on like a foot by foot paper, let alone a 10 by 10 foot like canvas, because who knows, you may not know how to take up all that space efficiently. You may not know how to deal with the textures or what kind of paint you need. And you only get that knowledge by just doing it. So to kind of hear that from a painter, you would kind of laugh or chuckle and say like, that's a little ridiculous. Same goes for film. If you're waiting for that red camera, if you're waiting for the $2 million budget, which is still small or whatever by Hollywood standards, but even if you're waiting for something like that, like, it's silly and you're not going to get anywhere.
No.
Do it. Go do it.
You don't have a wall to paint on? Just paint on the ground. Start painting. Paint around you.
There you go.
We're right where you stand.
I think I think I saw somewhere where somebody was in that, a painter was in that situation, like no wall, no canvas. So I think he started drawing in his house, like on his walls. So just.
And that just shows you gotta just drive for it. And as like sort of a closing topic or like a bigger philosophy, what does your pre-production process look like? Saying you have the final script done and you have it all figured out. how do you think about the production process? Like, what steps do you take first? Do you storyboard first, or do you do like a prop list first? Like, what are your guys' mindsets as like directors being handed a script?
Is finding a crew a part of that?
Let's say because of the 2-minute film challenge, so it's more relevant to that. Let's say it's just you solo.
Okay, me. Well, I wrote the script. I guess now next thing to do is actually storyboard it for my brother, who's going to be on cinematography. So, just so he knows what I want within these 2 minutes. I mean, getting everything else ready, like props. I mean, I know what I need. I don't know. I mean, I guess storyboarding would be the main thing for this project.
Yeah, I'll concur with that. That storyboarding would be the first step, and really, like with that, honestly, just doing it, like rehearsing. Like if you have the space where you're gonna be storyboarding from, and you are gonna be the actor, your actors, or you find an actor, whether it be your family member or yourself, you just walk the scene out, and time yourself. And the big thing for me, like with before I even go into pre-production after a script, once I say okay, like set out to say that it's going to be done, I scour that script and I tear out as much as I can of like arbitrary or like nuances that can be turned down. I tone it down. I figure out how I can make 2 shots one. Like how can I say what I'm saying in 2 steps or 2 words? How can I just use 1 word? And I just that comes with rehearsing it for me. Like I go out into the space and I walk it. And if so, like I feel like when you do that and you're hearing yourself talk or you're watching yourself move, it becomes apparent to you like what am I doing? Like this sounds blocky or this feels blocky. So then you start to scrap, and then you start to formally lock down storyboarding. But really get a on paper rationalist approach, like this shot, or these are the images that I want to see. I'm gonna walk it. Okay, this doesn't work, and or this goes over time, cut it. Like, how can I make this lead into this quickly? So just set up, and going back to what True was saying, like, I feel like with the 2-minute, like, the 2-minute challenge, it's a lot of setup and payoff. Like, really hone in on does this payoff, is this payoff satisfying? Or does this setup lead to nowhere? Even if it doesn't, even if it leads up to something halfway, eliminate it. Like, figure out how to make it the most satisfying that you can for not only your audience, but also for yourself. Like, did I tell the story right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I really like that minimalist mindset almost, to where I had recently stumbled across a subreddit on the website Reddit. It's called a 2-sentence horror, to where they try and like tell a horror story in just 2 sentences, you know, the very definition of minimal. And I was like, you can't do that. And then one that I'd read said, I'd been told that you die twice, once when you're buried, and the other when someone says your name for the last time. What they don't tell you is it's not always in that order. And I just like got chills like thinking about it, like that. Ooh, like just like being a walking dead, man, just forgotten like by society, by family, by friends, and just like no one caring for you, you know, and just eliciting that sort of a response in 2 sentences. That shows that in a platform of 2 minutes, you know, what the possibilities are endless in a very efficient mind.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see what people craft. I look so forward to seeing the community coming together and really working their noodle. Like,
Definitely.
Yeah, you're stuck, so make the best of it.
I couldn't agree more. And I definitely recommend storyboarding. I recommend kind of doing like an equipment list of understanding what you have and what you don't. So if you just have a smartphone, okay, what can I do with a smartphone? And looking at videos on how to best do that. Aperture just released a great video on cinematography with an iPhone, so you guys can look at that. There's a lot you can do with very little, and we're all very excited to see that. For closing thoughts, what do you guys have? Do you guys have anything you just want to pass on to everyone?
Let's just tell the story, guys. Let's do it.
Let the story do the talking. You want to get fancy with visuals, be gorilla. And if you need inspiration, like what I find, like what True was saying, I find credence with that. The 2-minute or the 2-sentence scary stories. Just there's two types: flash short stories and then micro stories. And some of them are just even headlines. Like it's a headline that is a statement of its own. So just let's figure out how to say things on a duplicative level.
Mm-hmm. And to quickly add on to that, the world's shortest poem is 1 letter, or at least some argue the validity of like if that qualifies as a poem. But I think it's cool. It's just 1 letter. It's a lowercase I. But instead of the dot on the top of the I, it's a thumbprint. And that just shows how far a creative mind can go.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you guys very much for giving this podcast a listen. If you would enjoy that, we have 2 other episodes out. We'd appreciate it if you check those out. We're available on all streaming platforms. This includes YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and we're just available all around. So please give us a listen if you really enjoyed this on our other episodes, or reference us to friends. And feel free to participate in that 2-minute challenge. We are going to be very excited to see what you guys come out with. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you guys later.